Hi guys, tonight we are going to take a very slow, very quiet journey back in time. We are going to find ourselves in a place of great stillness. A place where the world is finally catching its breath after a very long and very loud period of history. We are going to talk about the simple, repetitive experience of traveling by train through the countryside in the years immediately following a major war. It is a time of transition. The great conflicts have ended, and the world is beginning to settle into a new kind of quiet. For many years, the sounds were sharp and sudden, but now the sounds are soft and rhythmic. We are focusing on the train because a train car is a special kind of space. It is a moving room, a small, enclosed sanctuary that carries you from one place to another without you having to do anything at all. You just sit, you just breathe, you just listen to the wheels on the tracks. This video is designed to help you drift off into a deep and peaceful sleep. There will be no excitement here. There will be no drama. There will be no sudden movements or loud noises. We are simply going to observe the world as it passes by the window of a slow-moving train in the late afternoon and early evening. We are going to feel the weight of our own bodies in the heavy fabric seats. We are going to watch the way the light changes as the sun goes down over fields that are finally at peace. Imagine, if you will, that you are sitting in a railway carriage. This carriage was built many years ago. It is made of heavy wood and thick steel, and it feels very solid. It feels safe. The war is over now, and the landscape outside is slowly returning to its natural state. The tracks stretch out ahead of us, and the tracks stretch out behind us. And we are right here, in the middle, suspended in a moment of perfect, monotonous calm. The train is not moving fast. In these post-war years, there is no need to rush. The coal is being shoveled slowly into the engine far ahead of us, and the steam is rising in white clouds that drift past the windows and vanish into the cool air. We are traveling through the heart of the countryside. There are no sirens here. There are no heavy boots on the pavement. There is only the wind in the grass and the steady, reliable heartbeat of the train. You are sitting by the window. The seat is covered in a thick, scratchy wool fabric. It is a dark, faded blue color, and it smells faintly of old dust and tobacco and the passing of time. It is a very comfortable seat, even if the fabric is a little rough against your skin. It is the kind of seat that you sink into, the kind of seat that holds your weight and lets you relax every muscle in your body. Your shoulders drop. Your hands rest loosely in your lap. Your head leans back against the high headrest, and you feel the gentle vibration of the train car traveling up through the floor and into your bones. It is a soft vibration. It is not jarring. It is like a hum, a low-frequency song that the train sings as it moves across the land. It tells you that everything is moving as it should. It tells you that you are being taken care of. Outside the window, the light is beginning to turn a soft, golden yellow. The sun is hanging low in the sky, casting long, thin shadows across the fields. These fields were once places of movement and noise, but now they are just fields again. They are filled with tall grass and wildflowers that sway in the breeze created by the passing train. You can see a row of trees in the distant store, slender poplars that stand like silent sentinels against the horizon. They don't move much. They just stand there, watching the train go by. The train goes click-clack, click-dash-clack. It is a very steady sound. Click-clack, click-dash-clack. It happens every few seconds, a rhythmic reminder of the joints in the rails. You find yourself waiting for the next one, and when it comes, it is exactly as you expected it to be. Click-clack. It is predictable. It is boring. It is the most wonderful sound in the world because it means nothing is changing. You are just moving forward, slowly and steadily. Through the quiet afternoon, the air inside the carriage is cool, but not cold. There is a small heater under the seat that gives off a faint, metallic warmth. Every now and then, a small draft of fresh, earthy air comes in through the gap in the window frame, bringing with it the scent of damp soil and drying hay. It is a clean smell. It is the smell of a world that is healing itself. You look at the wood paneling on the opposite wall of the compartment. The wood is a deep mahogany, polished by the coats and hands of thousands of passengers who came before you. It has a soft glow in the evening light. There are small brass fixtures, a luggage rack above your head, a heavy latch on the door, a small ashtray built into the armrest. Everything is made of heavy materials. Everything feels permanent. In a world that felt so fragile for so long, this permanence is very soothing. It is a weight that anchors you to the present moment. The train slows down as it approaches a small bridge. You can hear the change in the acoustics as the sound of the wheels bounces off the stone walls of the bridge. The click-clack becomes deeper, more hollow, thump-thump. And then, as the train clears the bridge, the sound opens up again, returning to its light, rhythmic cadence. You watch a small farmhouse pass by. It is a simple stone building with a slate roof. A thin wisp of grey smoke rises from the chimney, curling lazily into the still air. There is no one outside. The cows in the nearby pasture are lying down, their heavy bodies pressed into the grass as they prepare for the night. They don't even look up as the train passes. They are used to the train. The train is part of the landscape now. It belongs here, just like the trees and the stones and the slow-moving clouds. Your eyelids are starting to feel heavy. It is a very natural feeling. You have been traveling for a long time, and the exhaustion of the past years is finally catching up with you in the best possible way. It is not a stressful exhaustion. It is the exhaustion of peace. It is the feeling of finally being allowed to let go. The train sways gently to the left as it follows a long sweeping curve in the tracks. You feel your body lean slightly with the movement, and then straighten out again as the tracks level off. The rocking motion is very much like a cradle. It is a slow, side-to-side movement that lulls your senses. You find yourself matching your breathing to the rhythm of the train. Inhale, click-clack, exhale, click-clack. The interior of the train car is dimming now. The golden light has turned to a soft, dusty purple. The shadows inside the compartment are growing longer, filling the corners with a gentle darkness. You don't turn on the reading light. You prefer the twilight. You prefer the way the world becomes less distinct, the way the edges of the seats and the lines of the window frame begin to blur together. You look at your reflection in the window glass. It is a faint reflection, hovering over the passing landscape. You look tired, but you look calm. The lines on your face seem to soften in the fading light. Behind your reflection, the world continues its slow retreat into the night. A small village appears in the distance. You see the flickering lights of oil lamps and the occasional glow of a new electric bulb in a window. The village is quiet. There are no crowds. There is no urgency. The train does not stop at this village. It simply rolls past, a silent witness to the quiet lives being lived behind those stone walls. You see a stone church with a tall spire, its silhouette sharp against the deepening blue of the sky. And then the village is gone, replaced once more by the endless, rolling hills and the dark clusters of woods. The woods are deep and still. The trees are huddled together, their branches interlaced like fingers. as the train passes through a cutting between two hills. The sound of the engine becomes muffled, as if the earth itself is trying to keep the noise down. The air feels cooler here, and the scent of pine needles and damp moss fills the carriage for a moment. It is a very old smell, a smell that has existed long before the war and will exist long after. It is the smell of the earth breathing. You adjust your position slightly, tucking your chin into your coat collar. The fabric of your coat is heavy and warm. It feels like a blanket. You close your eyes for a moment, and the world disappears, leaving only the sounds and the sensations. You feel the vibration in your feet. You feel the sway in your hips. You hear the whistle of the wind against the glass. You hear the rhythmic click-clack of the metal on metal. When you open your eyes again, the sky has turned a deep indigo. The first stars are beginning to appear teeny, cold pinpricks of light that do not flicker. They are steady. They are reliable. The moon has not yet risen, but there is a faint glow on the horizon that suggests it is on its way. The train is moving through a wide, flat plain now. The horizon feels very far away. In the darkness, the landscape looks like a vast, still ocean. The occasional light from a distant farm looks like a lonely ship at sea. You feel very small in this vastness, but it is a good kind of small. It is the kind of small that means you don't have to worry about the big things anymore. The big things are over. There is only the train and the track and the night. The repetitive nature of the journey is very hypnotic. Every mile is much like the mile before it. Every field is a variation of the same theme. Every click-clack is a perfect echo of the one that preceded it. There is nothing new to see, and that is a relief. Your mind, which has spent so long being alert and watchful, can finally stop searching for patterns or threats. The pattern is already here. The weight of the seat beneath you seems to increase as the minutes pass, and you find that your body is settling into the deep cushions with a sense of permanence that you have not felt in a very long time. As the thick wool fabric of the upholstery catches the light from the single dim bulb in the ceiling and creates a soft texture that you can feel through your clothes. And you notice how the material has been worn smooth in certain places where countless other travelers have rested their heads and their hands during similar journeys across these same fields and valleys. The air in the carriage is still and carries the faint scent of old wood and the cooling metal of the structure around you. And as the train moves further into the quiet countryside, the sensation of being carried becomes the only thing that truly matters. A steady and unwavering progression through the dark that requires no effort from you and offers no distractions from the simple act of existing in this small and protected space. You look at the dark wood paneling of the compartment door and notice the way the light plays across the grain, tracing the lines of the timber that was harvested and shaped many years ago. And you think about the steady hands that fitted these panels together to create a room that moves. A room that carries its own history and its own sense of order into a world that is slowly returning to its natural rhythms. Outside the window, the landscape is a blur of dark shapes and muted colors, and you see the silhouettes of trees that stand like silent watchers as the train passes them by, their branches heavy and motionless in the cool night air. And you imagine the way the grass in the fields is swaying ever so slightly in the wake of the train's passage, a gentle ripple that quickly settles back into stillness once we have moved on. The light from the carriage windows casts a long and rectangular glow onto the embankments and the edges of the woods, and you watch as this light slides across the surface of the earth, illuminating the occasional stone wall or the wooden fence of a farm that has been there for generations. and you find a deep comfort in the knowledge that these things are still there, that the land remains constant even as the seasons change and the years move forward in their predictable cycle. Across the aisle, another passenger is sitting with their head tilted to one side, their eyes closed, and their breathing so shallow and regular that they seem to have become part of the carriage itself. Their heavy coat draped over their knees to keep out the slight chill that creeps in from the edges of the window frame. And you watch the way their hands are resting loosely in their lap, fingers slightly curled in a posture of complete and total relaxation that only comes when one feels entirely safe and entirely removed from the demands of the world. The motion of the train is not a series of sudden movements, but rather a continuous and fluid shifting of weight, a slow oscillation that makes you feel as though you were being held in a vast and gentle cradle that is moving across the surface of the planet with a singular purpose. And you find that your own breathing is beginning to match the pace of this motion, each inhale and exhale becoming longer and deeper as you let go of the need to be alert or the need to be anywhere other than exactly where you are. You notice the small details of the interior, such as the brass latch on the window that has been polished by the friction of many fingers, and the way the shadows in the corners of the ceiling seem to pulse very slowly as the train follows the curves of the track. And these things feel important in their mundane, as if the small and ordinary parts of life are the things that provide the strongest foundation for peace. The train passes over a bridge, and the feeling of the air beneath the floor changes, becoming a more resonant and hollow sensation that vibrates through the soles of your shoes and into your ankles. And then the sound settles back into its regular and muted tone as we reach the solid earth once more. And you find yourself anticipating the next subtle change in the environment with a sense of calm curiosity. The landscape outside is opening up into a wide plain where the moon is visible through a break in the clouds, and the light it sheds over the fields is a pale and ghostly blue that makes the world look like it is made of silver and silk. And you see the distant glow of a single lamp in a farmhouse window and wonder about the quiet life being lived there, a life of early mornings and steady work and the simple satisfaction of a day well spent. The train does not hurry, as there is no reason to rush when the destination is merely a point on a map, and the journey itself is the true purpose of the night. And you appreciate the slow and methodical way the engine pulls the weight of the carriages through the darkness, a machine that is doing exactly what it was designed to do without any pretense or any urgency. You adjust your position slightly, feeling the way your muscles have softened and the way your bones feel heavy and dense. And you lean your temple against the cool glass of the window, feeling the minute tremors of the movement as a soft and constant pressure that lulls your mind into a state of quiet reflection. The history of this journey is not one of great events or sudden changes, but of the millions of moments like this one, where the world is reduced to the size of a railway carriage, and the only task is to watch the shadows and listen to the silence that exists beneath the steady movement of the wheels. You think about the people who built these tracks, laying down the stones and the iron in long and straight lines that cross the hills and the valleys, and you feel a sense of gratitude for the permanence of their work and the way it allows you to drift through the night with such ease and such certainty. The air in the compartment is becoming even more still, as if the very atoms of the atmosphere are settling down for the night, and you notice a small speck of dust dancing in a stray beam of light, moving in a slow and erratic circle that seems to contain its own quiet logic. And you watch it until your eyes grow heavy and the shapes of the room begin to blur into a single and harmonious whole. The train is moving through a section of the track where the trees grow close to the line, and their leaves brush softly against the sides of the carriages with a sound that is like a faint and distant whisper. A reminder that the world is close and that you are protected from its elements by the sturdy walls of your moving sanctuary. You imagine the steam from the engine rising into the cold air and dissipating into the dark, a white cloud that leaves no trace of its existence other than the forward momentum it provides. And you find that this thought is very soothing. The idea of a force that works quietly and then vanishes without leaving any burden behind. The floor of the carriage is covered in a heavy linoleum that has been scuffed by the boots of many travelers. And you trace the patterns of the wear with your eyes, seeing the history of movement and the history of rest that is etched into the very surface of the train. And you feel as though you are part of a long and continuous line of people who have found solace in the repetitive nature of the railway. The light outside is changing again as we pass through a small cutting in the side of a hill, and the walls of earth rise up on either side of the window, blocking out the moon and the stars for a few moments and creating a deep and absolute darkness that makes the interior of the carriage feel even brighter and more welcoming than before. You notice the way the light reflects off the glass of the framed advertisements on the wall, showing peaceful scenes of coastal towns and mountain retreats that seem like distant and beautiful dreams. And you realize that you don't need to go to those places to find the peace they promise, because the peace is already here in the slow movement of the train and the quiet company of the night. The other passengers remain in their states of deep repose, and you find that their presence is a comfort, a shared experience of stillness that doesn't require any words or any acknowledgement, just the mutual understanding that we are all being carried toward the same quiet horizon. The train sways gently to the left, and you feel the weight of your body shift in response, a movement that is as natural and as effortless as the tide coming in or the sun setting over the hills. And you embrace the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself, a system of motion and order that has no beginning and no end. The stillness of the post-war countryside is a profound and heavy thing, a silence that has been earned through long years, and a silence that is now being protected by the steady and predictable routine of the daily trains that cross the land. And you feel as though you are a guardian of this silence, a witness to the return of normalcy and the return of the simple joys of a quiet life. You watch a small bridge pass by, its stone arches looking solid and eternal in the moonlight, and you think about how the water in the stream below is flowing toward the sea, with the same steady and unhurried pace as the train, a movement that is governed by the laws of physics and the passage of time. The interior of the carriage is filled with a soft and golden light that seems to emanate from the very wood and the very fabric of the seats. And you find that you can no longer distinguish between the warmth of the room and the warmth of your own body, as everything has merged into a single and comfortable sensation of well-being. Shifts across the surface of the glass as the train moves forward into the deeper parts of the night, where the moon is the only source of light for many miles in every direction, and you find yourself observing the way the silver glow highlights the small scratches on the window frame that tell a story of many years of travel and many hands that have rested in this exact spot. The air in the carriage has settled into a very specific state of stillness, a weight that seems to press gently against your skin and remind you that you are enclosed in a safe and moving space that is separate from the rest of the world. You notice the way the light from the single dim bulb in the ceiling reflects off the brass fittings of the luggage rack, creating small points of golden light that shimmer every time the carriage leans into a long and gentle curve in the tracks. The fabric of the seat beneath you is thick and heavy, and you can feel the individual threads of the wool as they press against your palms, a texture that is both rough and comforting in its durability and its age. Across the aisle, a passenger is wearing a heavy wool coat that has been draped over their shoulders like a blanket, and you watch the way the fabric rises and falls with their slow and regular breathing, a movement that is so subtle it is almost impossible to see unless you focus all of your attention on the way the shadows shift in the folds of the material. There is a sense of profound order in this quiet observation, a feeling that everything is in its proper place, and that the world is functioning exactly as it should be in this moment of recovery and rest. The floor of the carriage is covered in a dark and worn linoleum that shows the path that many feet have taken to reach their seats, and you find yourself tracing the patterns of the wear with your eyes, following the lines as they curve around the base of the seats and disappear under the shadows of the heavy wooden doors. The history of this train is written in these small and ordinary details, in the way the wood has been polished by the friction of hands and the way the metal has been smoothed by the passage of time, and you feel a deep sense of connection to the people who built this machine and the people who have maintained it through the long years. The train continues its steady progress through the countryside, and the movement is so regular and so predictable that it begins to feel like a part of your own heartbeat, a pulse that carries you through the dark without any effort or any intention on your part. Outside the window, the fields have become a vast and featureless sea of dark blue, and you can only tell where the land ends and the sky begins by the absence of stars near the horizon, a line that shifts and moves as the train climbs a gentle embankment or descends into a shallow valley. You think about the way the earth feels under the weight of the train, a solid and unyielding foundation that has supported the movement of people and goods for generations, and you find a great deal of comfort in the permanence of the ground and the reliability of the iron rails. The carriage sways again, a slow and deliberate tilt to the right that causes the heavy curtains to move ever so slightly against the glass, and you watch the way the fabric catches the light and reveals the intricate patterns of the weave that have been obscured by the shadows for most of the journey. The interior of the compartment is filled with a soft and muted sound that is not a noise, but a presence. The collective resonance of the metal and the wood as they respond to the movement of the wheels and the pressure of the wind against the exterior of the car. You notice the way your own breathing has slowed down to match the pace of the journey, each breath a long and steady movement that fills your lungs with the cool and recycled air of the carriage and then releases it back into the stillness of the room. The post-war world is a place where the simple act of traveling from one place to another is a victory in itself, a return to the routines and the structures that provide a sense of meaning and a sense of safety to the passage of time. You look at the small ashtray built into the armrest and notice the way the light reflects off its polished surface, a tiny detail that reminds you of the care and the attention that went into the design of this space, a space that was meant to be used and lived in and enjoyed by people who are simply trying to get home. The shadows in the corners of the ceiling seem to be growing longer and deeper as the night progresses, and they move in a slow and rhythmic dance that is synchronized with the sway of the carriage and the shifting of the light from the moon. You find yourself focusing on the buttons of your own coat, noting the way the thread is wound around the base of the plastic, and the way the fabric is slightly puckered where the button is attached. A small and mundane observation that fills your mind with a sense of calm and order. The journey is not about reaching a destination, but about existing in this state of transition, a state where the past and the future are distant and irrelevant, and the only thing that matters is the present moment and the physical sensations of the movement. You think about the other carriages in the train, the long line of wooden and steel boxes that are all moving together in perfect unison, each one carrying its own collection of sleeping people and quiet stories through the night. The engine far ahead is doing the work that allows all of this to happen, pulling the weight of the train with a singular and unwavering focus that is a testament to the power of the machine and the skill of the people who operate it. You imagine the way the steam rises from the engine and vanishes into the cold air. A white cloud that leaves no mark on the landscape but provides the energy that carries you forward into the darkness. The fields outside are occasionally broken by the silhouette of a lone tree or a small stone building, and you watch as these shapes appear and disappear with a regularity that is hypnotic and soothing to your eyes. The movement of the train is a constant and reliable force, a steady progression that has no need for speed or for urgency, and you find that you have no desire to be anywhere else but here, in this seat, in this carriage, in this night. The history of the world is full of moments of noise and moments of movement, but the most important moments are the ones like this, where the noise has faded away and the movement is so steady that it becomes a form of silence. You notice the way the light from the corridor flickers under the door, a thin line of yellow that pulses with the vibration of the train and creates a rhythmic pattern on the floor of the compartment that you can follow with your eyes for as long as you wish. The upholstery of the seat is slightly worn at the edges, and you can see the pale threads of the backing material where the wool has been rubbed away by the movement of many bodies over many years, a detail that makes the carriage feel like a living thing that has its own history and its own experiences. You feel the weight of your own body in the seat, a heavy and solid presence that is being cradled by the cushions and the frame of the car. And you realize that you have let go of all the tension in your muscles and all the thoughts in your mind. The air in the carriage is becoming even more still as the night goes on, and you find that you can hear the faint and distant sound of the wind as it brushes against the exterior of the train, a soft and constant whisper that reminds you of the vastness of the world outside and the intimacy of the space inside. The post-war countryside is a place of quiet recovery and steady growth, and the train is a part of that process, a bridge between the cities and the farms and the people who live in them. You think about the way the tracks are laid out across the land, a network of iron and stone that connects the distant corners of the country and provides a sense of unity and a sense of purpose to the movement of the people. The carriage sways once more, a long and slow movement that feels like a heavy hand being placed on your shoulder, and you lean your head back against the high headrest and close your eyes for a moment, letting the darkness and the movement wash over you. The texture of the fabric against the back of your head is familiar and comforting, and you find yourself tracing the patterns of the weave with your thoughts, imagining the hands that worked the looms to create this material many years ago. The world outside the window is a distant and secondary thing, a blur of shapes and colors that has no power over you and no influence on the peace of the carriage. You are a passenger in a moving room, a silent witness to the passage of time and the movement of the train. And you find that this role is exactly what you need in this moment of your life. The light from the moon is now casting long and thin shadows across the fields, and you watch as the shadows of the telegraph poles move across the ground like the hands of a clock, marking the progress of the night in a way that is slow and steady and predictable. You think about the people who are sleeping in the houses that the train passes, people who are dreaming of the future and resting from the past, and you feel a sense of kinship with them that is based on the shared experience of the quiet night. The interior of the carriage is a study in the beauty of the mundane, in the way that wood and metal and fabric can be combined to create a space that is functional and beautiful and deeply soothing to the human spirit. As the train moves into a deeper stretch of the valley where the hills rise up on either side to block out the low moon and leave the carriage in a state of soft and heavy shadows that seem to cling to the corners of the wooden panels and the curves of the velvet seats, and you find yourself observing the way the light from the small lamp in the corridor casts a long and narrow sliver of yellow across the floorboards that move slowly back and forth with every subtle change in the direction of the tracks. The air in the compartment has reached a point of perfect stillness where the scent of the old wool and the faint metallic taps of the cooling pipes has merged into a single and familiar atmosphere that tells your mind that you are safe and that the world outside is very far away. You notice the way the brass screws that hold the mahogany panels in place have been polished by years of vibration, until they catch the dim light like tiny and stationary stars, each one a testament to the careful construction of this moving room that was built to last through many different eras of history and carry people across the land with a sense of quiet and unyielding purpose. The fabric of your seat feels even more substantial now, as if the weight of your body has pressed out all the air between the fibers and left only a solid and supportive structure that holds you in place without requiring any effort on your part to stay upright or balanced as the carriage sways with the rhythm of the journey. Across the small space, the dark shape of the opposite seat is a mirror of your own, its high back and deep cushions waiting in the silence for a passenger who may not arrive until the sun has risen and the train has reached a different part of the country altogether. You look at the window and see the way the condensation has begun to form at the very bottom of the glass, a thin and misty line that blurs the view of the passing grass and the distant silhouettes of the trees that stand like silent watchers in the middle of the fields. The night has reached its most profound point of darkness, a time when the landscape is no longer a collection of distinct objects, but a single and vast expanse of deep blue and black that stretches out toward a horizon that you can no longer see. This absence of visual detail is a relief to your eyes, as it allows your mind to settle into a state of quiet contemplation where the only thing that matters is the steady and predictable movement of the train as it follows the path that was laid out for it many decades ago. The tracks beneath the floor are a constant and reliable guide, their iron surfaces smoothed by the passage of thousands of wheels and their stone foundations settled deep into the earth, providing a sense of stability that is both physical and emotional in its depth. You find yourself thinking about the process of making the glass in the window, how it was once molten and glowing and was then cooled into this clear and solid barrier that protects you from the wind and the cold while allowing you to witness the slow progression of the night. There are tiny imperfections in the glass, small ripples and bubbles that you only notice when the light from a distant farmhouse or a passing signal lamp catches them at just the right angle. And these details feel like a quiet conversation between the past and the present. The train moves through a section of the forest where the branches of the oaks and the elms seem to lean in toward the carriage, their leaves creating a flickering pattern of shadows that dance across the walls and the ceiling in a way that is both hypnotic and calming. You notice the way the light from the interior lamp reflects off the surface of the framed photograph on the wall, a picture of a bridge that was built to span a wide river in the north. And you find comfort in the idea of these great structures that endure through the years and provide a way for the world to stay connected and for life to continue in its slow and orderly fashion. The history of this journey is not one of speed or efficiency, but of the steady accumulation of miles and the quiet passage of hours. a process that is as natural and as inevitable as the changing of the seasons. You look at the way your hands are resting on the armrest, the skin looking pale in the dim light and the fingers completely still, and you realize that the tension that you have carried for so long has finally begun to dissolve into the heavy air of the carriage. The other passengers are still in their states of deep repose, their presence a soft and comforting hum that reminds you that you are part of a collective experience of rest and recovery in a world that is finally finding its way back to peace. The train does not change its pace, nor does the engine far ahead show any sign of straining or fatigue, as it is a machine that was designed for exactly this kind of long and monotonous work. A work that is essential for the restoration of the land and the reconnection of the people. You find yourself focusing on the texture of the carpet under your feet, a thick and industrial material that has been worn down in the center of the aisle but remains plush and soft near the edges where the shadows are deepest. The movement of the train is a fluid and continuous shifting of weight that makes you feel as though you are floating on a river of iron, a river that flows through the heart of the countryside and carries you past the sleeping villages and the silent woods with a grace that is both powerful and understated. You think about the quiet pride of the people who maintain the tracks, the laborers who walk the lines in the early morning light to ensure that every bolt is tight and every stone is in its proper place. And you feel a sense of gratitude for their dedication to the mundane and the essential. The darkness outside is occasionally broken by the soft glow of a signal box, a small and lonely building where a single person sits in the silence and watches the progress of the train. Their presence a reminder that the system of the railway is a human endeavor that relies on the steady and reliable work of many different hands. The light from the signal box is a brief and flickering green that illuminates the side of the carriage for a second, before fading back into the indigo of the night, leaving you once again with the soft and golden light of the interior. You notice the way the shadow of your own head is cast against the wood paneling, a dark and indistinct shape that moves in time with the swaying of the train and creates a sense of depth and mystery in the small compartment. The stillness of the air is so complete that you can almost hear the sound of your own heart beating, a slow and regular pulse that matches the rhythmic vibration of the floor and the steady pressure of the wind against the glass. The history of the world feels like a distant and half-remembered dream in this space, as the only reality that exists is the reality of the train and the track and the night. You look at the heavy brass latch of the door and imagine the sound it would make if it were turned, a solid and metallic click that would signal the end of the journey. But for now, the latch remains still and the door remains closed, protecting the sanctuary of the carriage from the unknown spaces of the outside world. The train is moving through a wide and flat plain where the stars are visible once again, their light cold and steady in the vastness of the sky. And you find that you are staring at a single constellation without really knowing its name or its significance, simply enjoying the beauty of the distant points of light. The movement of the carriage is a form of communication, a way for the machine to tell you that it is doing its job and that you can afford to let go of your worries and your fears. You find that you are breathing more deeply than you have in many hours, each inhale drawing in the quietness of the night, and each exhale releasing the last remnants of the day into the shadows. The upholstery of the seat is a dark and muted blue that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it, creating a sense of depth and softness that invites you to lean back even further and close your eyes. The texture of the wool is slightly rough against your skin, but it is a roughness that is familiar and grounding, a reminder of the natural world and the simple materials that make up the structures of our lives. You notice the way the light from the corridor lamp catches the edge of a small metal plate on the wall that gives instructions for the operation of the heater. And you find yourself reading the words over and over again, until they lose their meaning and become just a series of shapes and lines in the dim light. The history of the railway is a history of the quiet and the persistent, of the machines and the people who keep moving forward even when the rest of the world has stopped to rest. You think about the way the steam from the engine must be curling round the front of the train, a white and ephemeral cloud that marks the passage of the machine through the cold and silent air. The landscape outside is a blur of dark shapes and soft colors, a world that is undergoing its own process of healing and recovery in the quiet hours of the night. The train passes a small and abandoned cottage near the tracks, its stone walls looking grey and weathered in the starlight. And you wonder about the people who once lived there and the lives they led before the world changed. The cottage is a reminder of the permanence of the land and the transient nature of human events. And you find a sense of peace in the knowledge that the hills and the fields will remain long after the train has reached its destination and the passengers have gone their separate ways. And the way the metal is cold and smooth to the touch, and you follow the line of the rail as it stretches across the top of the compartment, providing a place for the heavy leather bags and the worn canvas satchels that rest quietly above the heads of the sleeping travelers. And you find yourself wondering about the contents of those bags, the simple clothes and the personal items that have been packed with care for this long journey across the quiet countryside. The light from the corridor continues to cast its long and narrow shadow across the floor, and you watch the way the shadow dances over the scuffed linoleum, tracing the patterns of wear and tear that tell a story of many years of movement and many passengers who have walked this same path toward their own private destinations. Outside the window, the train is passing a small town where the buildings are huddled together in the darkness, their brick walls looking dark and solid under the dim light of the few street lamps that remain lit in the late hours of the night. You notice the way the light reflects off the windows of the houses, creating tiny and flickering sparks that disappear as quickly as they appear. And you think about the people inside those houses, sleeping in their beds and resting from the quiet work of the day. There is a factory on the edge of the town with a tall chimney that rises up against the indigo sky, and you can see the faint outline of scaffolding around the base of the structure, a subtle sign of the repairs and the restoration that are taking place in this post-war landscape where everything is slowly being put back into order. The train does not slow down as it passes the factory, but maintains its steady and monotonous pace, the movement of the wheels providing a constant and reliable rhythm that fills the carriage and provides a sense of continuity to the passage of time. You look at the passenger sitting 3 rows ahead of you, their head resting against the window and their body slumped in a position of complete and total exhaustion. And you notice the way their hand is resting on the armrest, the fingers loosely curled around a folded newspaper that has been read and reread until the edges are soft and frayed. The newspaper probably contains news of the recovery and the steady progress of the country, simple stories of reconstruction and the return to normalcy that provide a sense of comfort to those who are traveling through the night. The air in the carriage is still and cool, and you can feel the slight draft from the window frame as it brushes against your cheek, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and the faint smell of coal smoke from the engine far ahead. You notice the way the light from the moon is caught in the moisture on the grass as the train moves through a wide and open field, the surface of the land looking like a vast and shimmering sea of silver and grey. There are no cows or sheep in the fields at this hour, Only the stillness of the grass and the occasional silhouette of a stone wall that marks the boundary between one farm and another. You think about the history of those walls, the way they were built by hand over many years to provide a sense of structure and a sense of permanence to the land, and you find a deep sense of peace in the knowledge that they remain unchanged even as the world around them has moved through periods of noise and movement. The train enters a shallow cutting where the earth rises up on either side of the carriage, and the sound of the wheels becomes a deeper and more resonant tone that vibrates through the frame of the seat and into your bones. You watch the way the shadows of the grass on the embankment are cast against the glass, creating a flickering pattern of lines and shapes that moves in time with the swaying of the train. The interior of the compartment is filled with a soft and golden light that seems to come from the wood and the fabric itself, and you find that your eyes are naturally drawn to the small and unnoticeable details of the space, such as the way the lace antimacassar on the headrest of the opposite seat is slightly crooked, or the way the brass screws in the door frame have been turned so that the slots are all aligned in the same direction. These small signs of order and care are very soothing to your mind, as they provide a sense of stability and a sense of purpose to the environment. The train sways gently to the right as it follows the curve of a river that you can see in the distance, the water looking like a dark and winding ribbon that reflects the light of the stars. You think about the way the river has flowed through this valley for thousands of years, and the way the railway was built to follow its path, a human structure that works in harmony with the natural contours of the land. The movement of the train is so steady and so predictable that you find yourself losing track of the miles and the hours, and you are content to simply exist in this state of transition, where the only thing that matters is the sensation of being carried through the dark. The fabric of your coat is heavy and warm, and you pull it closer to your body, feeling the way the wool provides a barrier between you and the cool air of the night. You notice a small station appearing on the horizon, its platform illuminated by a single oil lamp that casts a warm and flickering glow over the wooden benches and the station master's office. The train does not stop at this station, but passes it with a slow and deliberate movement that allows you to see the details of the brickwork and the new paint on the door of the waiting room. There is no one on the platform, and the station looks like it is waiting for the morning when the first commuters will arrive, and the world will wake up to the sound of the birds and the movement of the sun. As the station recedes into the distance, you find yourself thinking about the routine of the railway, the way the trains follow the same schedule day after day and night after night, providing a sense of reliability and a sense of order to the lives of the people who depend on them. The movement of the train is a constant and unchanging fact, a foundation upon which the rest of the world can be built. You look at the reflection of your own eyes in the window glass, and you see the way the light from the corridor makes them look dark and deep, and you find yourself staring into the reflection until it becomes just another part of the shadows and the light of the night. The carriage is quiet and still, and you can hear the faint sound of the wind as it brushes against the exterior of the train, a soft and constant whisper that reminds you of the vastness of the countryside and the intimacy of the space inside. You notice the way the light from the ceiling lamp is reflected in the polished wood of the small table under the window, creating a soft and glowing rectangle that moves slowly as the train sways. The table is made of a dark and heavy mahogany, and you can see the grain of the wood as it flows across the surface, a natural and beautiful pattern that has been preserved for many years. You think about the trees that provided the wood for this carriage, the way they grew in a forest somewhere far away, and were then harvested and shaped by the hands of craftsmen who took pride in their work. The history of the materials is a history of the land itself, and you feel a sense of connection to the natural world as you sit in this moving room of wood and metal and fabric. The train passes over a set of points, and the carriage lurches slightly to the side, a movement that is as familiar and as expected as the rhythm of the wheels. You feel the weight of your body shift in the seat, and you adjust your position to compensate for the movement, your muscles working in a slow and automatic way that requires no conscious thought. The other passengers remain in their states of deep repose, their breathing slow and regular, their bodies part of the collective silence of the journey. You notice a passenger across the aisle who is wearing a heavy knitted sweater, the wool looking thick and soft in the dim light, and you imagine the hands that knitted the sweater, the rhythmic movement of the needles and the steady progression of the stitches. Everything in the world is composed of these small and repetitive actions, and the train is just a larger version of that same principle. The darkness outside the window is becoming even more profound as the moon sinks lower in the sky, and you find that you can only see the shapes of the land when the train passes a light from a distant farm or a signal box. The signal boxes are small and lonely structures that stand at intervals along the track, their windows glowing with a soft and green light that tells the engineer that the path ahead is clear and that the journey can continue. You think about the signalmen who sit in those boxes, their eyes fixed on the dials and the levers, their work providing a sense of security and a sense of safety to the movement of the train. The light from a signal box flashes across the interior of the carriage for a brief second, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air and the patterns of the fabric on the seats. And then it is gone, leaving you once again in the soft and heavy shadows of the night. The movement of the train is a fluid and continuous thing, a shifting of weight and a pulse of energy that carries you through the hills and the valleys with a grace that is both powerful and understated. You find yourself focusing on the texture of the carpet under your feet, the way the fibers are pressed down in the center of the aisle, and the way they remain plush and soft near the edges. As the train carries you past this small body of water, you feel a sense of calm that is as deep and as quiet as the pond itself. Your legs feel heavy and solid against the seat cushions, the weight of your own body becoming more apparent as you relax. Every muscle and let the movement of the carriage dictate your posture. The train has been moving for so long now that the concept of being stationary feels like a distant memory, a state of being that belongs to a different world and a different time. You notice the way the light from the corridor lamp creates a soft halo around the brass handle of the compartment door, a small circle of warmth that seems to pulse with the vibration of the machine. The air is cool and consistent, a steady temperature that has been maintained by the thick walls and the heavy insulation of the car. You find yourself thinking about the process of spinning wool, how the fibers are twisted and pulled to create the yarn that was then woven into the fabric of your seat. It is a slow and methodical process, much like the movement of this train across the countryside. You think about the sheep grazing on the hills, their wool growing thick and dense through the winter months, and how that same wool is now providing you with a sense of comfort and safety as you travel through the night. The passenger in front of you has shifted their position slightly, their shoulder leaning against the wood paneling with a heaviness that suggests they have completely surrendered to the rhythm of the journey. Their coat is a dark grey color, the fabric looking thick and durable, and you can see the small patterns of the weave even in the dim light. The silence in the carriage is a physical presence, a weight that settles over everything and mutes the sounds of the outside world. You can hear the steady breathing of the other travelers, a soft and rhythmic sound that reminds you that you are not alone in this experience of rest. The train moves through a stretch of the track that is perfectly straight, and the movement becomes even more fluid and more predictable than before. You find that your eyes are following the line where the wall meets the ceiling, tracing the curves and the angles of the mahogany trim with a sense of quiet fascination. The wood has a deep and lustrous finish, the result of many layers of polish and many years of care. You think about the carpenters who worked on this carriage, their hands skilled and patient as they fitted the pieces together to create this moving sanctuary. The history of the world is a long and complicated story, but here on the train it feels simple and orderly. The post-war landscape is a place of quiet recovery, where the fences are being mended and the fields are being tilled, and the world is slowly finding its way back to its natural state. You watch a row of haystacks pass by in a field, their shapes looking like soft mounds of shadow in the moonlight. They are a sign of the harvest, a sign that the land is productive and that the cycles of life are continuing as they always have. The movement of the train is a part of this cycle, a steady and reliable force that connects the different parts of the country and brings the people home. You feel a sense of peace in the knowledge that you are part of this movement, a small and quiet link in the chain of history. Your thoughts are becoming slower and less defined, like the edges of the clouds as they move across the moon. You find that you are no longer trying to identify the landmarks or the towns, but are instead simply enjoying the sensation of the movement and the warmth of the carriage. The weight of your own arms feels immense, your hands resting in your lap like heavy stones, and you realize that you have no desire to move them. The vibration of the floor is a constant and soothing hum that travels up through your feet and into your spine, a mechanical song that tells you that everything is moving exactly as it should. You think about the iron in the rails, how it was mined from the earth and forged in a great furnace to create the path that you are following. The rails are solid and true, their strength a foundation for the entire journey. You watch as a small bridge passes under the train, the change in the sound of the wheels being a brief and subtle reminder of the geography of the land. The night is a long and quiet expanse that seems to have no beginning and no end. You feel as though you have been traveling forever and that you could continue to travel for many more hours without ever feeling the need to stop. The light in the carriage is so soft that the shadows have become the dominant feature of the room, their shapes moving across the walls in a slow and graceful dance. You find yourself staring at a small brass screw in the window frame, the metal looking dark and tarnished in the dim light. You follow the circular lines of the screw, thinking about the hand that turned it and the tool that was used to put it in place. It is a small and mundane detail, but it feels important in its simplicity. The train sways gently to the left, and you feel the weight of your body shift against the seat, a movement that is as natural as the breath in your lungs. You are in a state of perfect equilibrium, a place where the movement of the train and the stillness of your body have become one and the same. The post-war world is a place where the simple joys of life are being rediscovered, and the train is a part of that rediscovery. You think about the way the light will look when the sun finally begins to rise over the horizon. But for now, the darkness is enough. The air in the carriage is still and peaceful, and you find that you are breathing more deeply than you have in a very long time. The texture of the fabric against your skin is a constant and reassuring presence, a reminder of the physical world and the comfort of the journey. You notice a small tear in the fabric of the seat across from you, a tiny opening that reveals the layers of padding and the structure of the chair. It is a mark of age and a mark of history, a sign that the carriage has carried many people through the night. The train moves on through the darkness, a steady and unwavering light in a world of shadows. You find that your mind is wandering to the thought of the engine once again, the way the fire burns in the darkness, and the way the steam provides the power for the journey. The engine is a hard-working machine, but it is also a source of comfort, a reliable and predictable force that you can depend on. You watch as the train passes a small signal box, the windows glowing with a soft green light that tells you that the path ahead is clear. The signalman is a silent observer of the night, their work essential to the safety of the journey. You feel a sense of gratitude for the people who keep the railway running, the engineers and the conductors and the signalmen who work through the night to ensure that the travelers reach their destinations. The movement of the train is a constant and soothing presence that fills the gaps in your thoughts and provides a rhythm for your mind to follow. You find that you are no longer thinking about the past or the future, but are instead simply existing in the present moment. The night is a gift of silence and a gift of movement, a time when the world is allowed to be still. You feel the weight of your own eyelids becoming too much to resist, and you let them close for a few seconds, enjoying the feeling of the darkness and the movement. When you open them again, the world looks the same as it did before, a landscape of shadows and light that moves past the window with a steady and predictable pace. The carriage is a sanctuary, a place where you can afford to be still and to be quiet. You notice the way the light from the corridor lamp is reflected in the polished wood of the doorframe, a small and glowing line that marks the boundary between the compartment and the rest of the train. The journey is a long and quiet progression through the night, a movement that has no need for words and no need for explanation. You think about the way the tracks are laid out across the countryside, a network of iron and stone that connects the different parts of the country. The railway is a part of the history of the land, a record of the movement of the people and the growth of the nation. You feel a sense of connection to this history as you sit in your seat and watch the world go by. The vibration of the train is a constant and reliable force, a heartbeat that tells you that the journey is continuing and that everything is as it should be. You notice the way the light from the moon is caught in the branches of a tree as the train passes, a brief and shimmering moment of beauty in the darkness. The tree is a silent witness to the passage of the train, its branches heavy and still in the night air. You feel a sense of peace in the knowledge that the world is a large and quiet place, and that you are just a small part of it. Your thoughts are becoming slower and more rhythmic, matching the pace of the wheels and the swaying of the carriage. You find that you are no longer trying to hold on to your awareness, but are instead letting it drift away like the steam from the engine. The weight of your body is a comforting anchor, a reminder of your physical presence in the world. You notice the way the shadows in the compartment are shifting as the train changes its direction, the dark shapes moving across the floor and the walls in a slow and graceful dance. The texture of the seat is soft and warm, a cushion that holds you in a state of perfect relaxation. You think about the long and winding path that has led you to this moment, and you realize that every step has been a part of the journey. And the way the light from the corridor seems to have thinned out into a pale and translucent sliver that barely reaches the edge of your shoes as the night moves into those quiet and deep hours that precede the very first hints of the dawn, when the world is at its coldest and its most still, and you find yourself observing the way the temperature of the glass has dropped even further, making the interior of the carriage feel like a small and insulated pocket of warmth that is being carried through a vast and frozen landscape. The air inside remains unchanged, a steady and motionless volume of space that carries the scent of the wood polish and the heavy wool of the seats. And you notice how the silence has deepened to a point where the movement of the train feels like a natural extension of the silence itself, rather than a disruption of it. Across the aisle, the passenger in the heavy coat has not moved at all, their posture remaining exactly as it was an hour ago and perhaps an hour before that. Their existence in this moment defined entirely by the slow and rhythmic rise and fall of their chest and the way the shadows of the window frame fall across their sleeping face. You look at the dark mahogany paneling and notice a small and circular knot in the wood that you had not seen before, its swirling grain creating a pattern that looks like a slow-moving eddy in a stream, and you follow the lines of the wood with your eyes for a long time, appreciating the way the natural growth of the tree has been preserved and encased in this moving room. The history of the world outside is a distant and fading thought, as the only reality that carries any weight is the reality of the seat beneath you, and the way the vibration of the floor feels like a constant and grounding presence that keeps you connected to the earth even as you move across it at a steady and unhurried pace. You find yourself thinking about the layers of paint on the exterior of the train, how they have been applied and reapplied over the years to protect the metal from the rain and the wind and the soot, and how those layers represent a kind of continuity that persists through every change in the world. The motion of the carriage is a slow and fluid oscillation that makes the brass fittings in the ceiling glow with a faint and rhythmic light, and you watch the way the shadows of the luggage racks stretch and contract against the opposite wall as the train follows the gentle curves of the track through the sleeping countryside. There is a sense that nothing new is happening and that nothing new needs to happen, as the perfection of the journey lies in its repetition and its predictability, a cycle of movement and rest that has no need for excitement or for change. You notice the way your own breathing has become so quiet that you can barely hear it, a soft and steady movement of air that matches the stillness of the room and the slow progression of the night. Outside the window, the landscape is a blur of deep indigo and charcoal grey, the fields looking like vast and empty spaces where time has stopped, and where the only movement is the movement of the train passing through the shadows. You see the faint silhouette of a water tower in the distance, a tall and silent structure that stands as a reminder of the needs of the engine and the long history of the steam that powers this journey. And you find comfort in the presence of these functional and reliable objects that populate the rural landscape. The interior of the carriage is filled with a soft and golden light that seems to have no specific source, but rather emanates from the materials themselves. The wood and the fabric and the metal all contributing to a sense of warmth and security that is both simple and profound. You find yourself focusing on a single thread that has come loose from the seam of the armrest, a small and white line of cotton that moves ever so slightly with the vibration of the car, and you watch it for many minutes, fascinated by the way such a small and insignificant thing can be a part of the larger movement of the train. The weight of your body in the seat is a heavy and comforting anchor that keeps you in place as the world slides by outside, and you realize that you have no desire to be anywhere else or to be doing anything other than exactly what you are doing now. The post-war world is a place where the simple act of sitting still and being carried through the night is a luxury and a peace that is to be cherished, a time when the noise of history has been replaced by the quiet and steady movement of the rails. You think about the way the tracks were constructed, the way the sleepers were laid in the earth, and the way the iron was bolted down to create a path that is both straight and true. And you feel a sense of gratitude for the order and the stability that this path provides to your life. The air in the compartment is becoming even more still as the pre-dawn hours approach, and you notice the way the light from the corridor lamp seems to be losing its strength, becoming a soft and diffused glow that barely touches the edges of the wooden door. You look at the window and see that the condensation has grown, the tiny droplets of water joining together to form small paths that run down the glass and disappear into the frame. A slow and silent movement that mirrors the movement of the train through the landscape. The darkness outside is so complete that you can no longer see the line between the earth and the sky, and the world feels like a vast and infinite space where the only light is the light of the stars and the dim glow of the carriage windows. You find yourself thinking about the quiet work that is happening in the engine far ahead, the way the coal is being fed into the fire, and the way the steam is being directed into the cylinders to create the power that moves the train. A process of energy and motion that is hidden from view but felt in every vibration of the floor and every sway of the carriage. The history of the railway is a history of this hidden work, of the millions of small and necessary tasks that are performed by people and machines to ensure that the journey continues without interruption or delay. You notice the way the shadow of your own foot is cast against the floor, a dark and still shape that seems to belong to someone else, a passenger who is even more still and even more quiet than you are. The upholstery of the seat is a thick and textured material that feels cool to the touch where your skin meets the fabric, but warm where your body has rested for many hours, and you find that you are constantly adjusting your perception of this warmth as the night progresses. The journey is a long and unmeasured expanse of time where the minutes and the hours have blurred together into a single and continuous experience of movement. A state of being where the destination is less important than the sensation of being in transit. You look at the small brass latch of the window and notice the way it has been polished by the friction of hands over the years, the metal looking bright and smooth in the dim light, and you find yourself imagining the many people who have opened and closed this window to breathe in the air of the countryside. Across the carriage, the other passengers are still and silent, their bodies merged with the shadows and the fabric of the seats. Their presence a soft and comforting hum that reminds you of the shared nature of this experience. The train moves over a small bridge, and the sound of the wheels changes for a brief second, becoming a deeper and more resonant tone that fills the space and then fades back into the steady and monotonous hum of the rails. As we reach the solid ground again, you find that you are no longer interested in the world outside, but are, instead, focused on the small and mundane details of the interior, the way the light reflects off the mahogany panels, and the way the shadows move in the corners of the ceiling. These things are enough to fill your mind and provide a sense of calm and order in a world that is otherwise dark and silent. The post-war atmosphere is one of quiet recovery and steady restoration, a time when the simple and ordinary structures of life are being appreciated for their reliability and their beauty. The train is a sanctuary, a moving room that carries the history of the country and the dreams of the people through the night, with a grace that is both powerful and understated. You notice the way the light from the moon is caught in the branches of a tree as the train passes, a brief and shimmering moment of silver in the darkness that disappears as quickly as it appears, leaving you once again in the soft and heavy shadows of the carriage. The movement of the machine is a constant and soothing presence that fills the gaps in your thoughts and provides a rhythm for your mind to follow as it drifts closer and closer to the threshold of deep and restorative rest. You think about the way the tracks stretch out before the train, a path that has been traveled many times before and will be traveled many times again. a symbol of continuity and a symbol of stability in a world that has seen so much change. You feel a sense of security in the knowledge that the train will continue to move through the night and that the tracks will guide it safely to its destination without any need for intervention or any need for worry. The vibration of the floor is a constant and reassuring heartbeat that tells you that everything is functioning exactly as it should, and that the journey is progressing in its slow and orderly fashion. You notice the way your own reflection in the window glass has faded into a ghostly and indistinct shape that hovers over the landscape, a reminder of the barrier that exists between the warmth of the carriage and the cold of the night. And as the shadows of the telegraph poles continue to stretch and lean across the floor of the compartment, you notice that the deep indigo of the sky is beginning to thin out into a pale and translucent shade of charcoal that suggests the very first approach of the morning without yet revealing any sign of the sun or the horizon. The transition is so slow and so subtle that you can only recognize the change by looking at the way the dark wood of the opposite door is now visible as a solid object rather than a void in the shadows, and you find yourself observing the fine grain of the mahogany as it emerges from the gloom with a soft and muted clarity that seems to possess its own quiet history of growth and stillness. The air in the carriage feels slightly denser now as the temperature outside drops to its lowest point before the light begins to climb, and you can feel the extra weight of the heavy wool blanket or the thick fabric of your coat as it settles over your shoulders, providing a barrier against the cool draft that occasionally whispers through the narrow gap in the window frame. Outside the glass, a layer of low-lying fog has begun to settle into the hollows of the fields and the valleys, creating a soft and white ocean of mist that swallows the bases of the trees and the foundations of the stone walls until the world looks like a collection of floating shapes and distant silhouettes that move past the train with a ghostly and effortless grace. You watch the way the train moves through this mist, and notice how the light from the carriage windows is diffused by the moisture in the air, creating long and glowing fingers of yellow that reach out into the grey and then vanish as the carriage carries you further into the quiet countryside, where the only activity is the slow and steady movement of the machine along the iron rails. The other passengers remain in their states of profound and undisturbed rest, and you notice the way the light of the pre-dawn hour catches the edge of a silver watch chain or the brass buckle of a suitcase with a dull and matte reflection that highlights the quality of the materials and the care with which they have been maintained through the years of change and recovery. There is a passenger in the corner whose head is resting against the high back of the seat, and you can see the faint and rhythmic movement of their wool scarf as it rises and falls, with their breathing a sign of a deep and restorative sleep that has completely removed them from the concerns of the destination or the passage of time. The interior of the compartment is filled with a sense of suspended animation, where the only constant is the vibration of the floor and the steady pressure of the cushions against your spine, and you find yourself leaning into this sensation with a total and unreserved acceptance of the journey as it unfolds in its slow and monotonous way. You notice the way the condensation on the window has formed into intricate patterns of frost and water, and as the light outside becomes slightly more grey, you can see the individual droplets as they merge and slide down the pane in a slow and predictable path that mirrors the movement of the train through the landscape. The history of the tracks is felt in every subtle shift of the carriage, and you think about the permanence of the stone sleepers and the iron spikes that have held these rails in place through the seasons and the years, providing a reliable and unwavering path for the people who seek to move across the land in peace and in quiet. The fog outside seems to be thickening in certain places, and you watch as the train passes through a bank of white mist that obscures the view entirely for a few moments, leaving you in a world that is defined only by the soft glow of the interior lamp and the familiar textures of the wood and the fabric that surround you. This temporary isolation is not a cause for concern, but rather a deepening of the sense of sanctuary that the carriage provides, and you find yourself breathing in the still and recycled air of the room with a sense of gratitude for the protection and the comfort of the space. As the train emerges from the fog, you notice that the sky has changed again, becoming a pale and watery shade of slate that allows you to see the distant horizon and the outlines of the hills that rise up like dark and sleeping giants against the grey of the atmosphere. The landscape is entirely silent, and you can imagine the way the dew is clinging to the grass, and the way the birds are still tucked into their nests, waiting for the first real warmth of the day to wake them from their slumber. The train passes a small farmhouse that sits alone in the middle of a wide field, and you notice the way. The stone of the building looks cold and damp in the early light, and you see the dark windows that suggest the inhabitants are still deep in their own dreams, unaware of the train as it rolls past their home in the quiet hours of the morning. There is a pile of new timber stacked near a fence, and the wood looks bright and clean against the muted colors of the earth, a subtle indication of the work that continues in the countryside to rebuild and restore the structures that sustain the life of the land. The movement of the train is a part of this reconstruction, a steady and reliable connection that brings the people and the materials to the places where they are needed without any sense of urgency or any disruption of the quiet order of the night. You look at the brass luggage rack above your head and notice the way the light of the morning is beginning to catch the edges of the metal, creating a soft and pale glow that makes the rack look like a permanent and solid part of the architecture of the room. The history of the travelers who have used this rack is a history of simple and necessary things, of suitcases filled with clothes and boxes, filled with memories, and you feel a sense of kinship with the nameless people who have shared this space and this movement with you over the years. The fabric of the seat across from you is a deep and faded blue, and you notice the way the light reveals the subtle variations in the color, where the sun has touched it or where the passage of time has softened the dye until it looks like a piece of the sky itself. The weight of your own limbs feels even heavier in this hour, as if the gravity of the earth has increased as the light has grown, and you find that you are content to remain perfectly still, letting the train do the work of movement while you simply observe the unfolding of the day. The vibration of the floor is a constant and soothing hum that seems to resonate within your own chest, providing a mechanical heartbeat that matches the slow and rhythmic pace of your own life. In this moment of transit and peace, you find yourself focusing on a small and polished metal plate on the wall that shows the number of the carriage, and you read the digits over and over again until they become a part of the pattern of your thoughts, a simple and reliable fact in a world that is otherwise soft and undefined. The train sways to the right as it follows a long curve around a hill, and you feel the weight of your body lean into the movement, a slow and deliberate shift that reminds you of the physical reality of the journey and the way the machine interacts with the landscape. The air in the compartment is cool, but the heater under the seat provides a constant and low-level warmth that keeps the chill of the morning at bay, and you find that you are perfectly balanced between the cold of the outside world and the heat of the interior. The night is not yet over, but the darkness has lost its power, and the world is entering a state of grey and quiet anticipation, where the only sound is the rhythmic movement of the wheels, and the only sensation is the steady pressure of the journey. You think about the engine far ahead, and the way the crew must be feeling as they watch the light change from the front of the train, seeing the fog lift and the tracks emerge from the gloom with a clarity that grows with every mile. Their work is a quiet and essential service that allows you to remain in this state of rest, and you feel a sense of appreciation for the routine and the discipline that keeps the railway moving through the quietest hours of the day. The fields outside are beginning to show more detail as the light increases, and you can see the individual blades of grass and the small wildflowers that are bent low with the weight of the morning dew, and you watch as the train passes a row of willow trees that grow along the edge of a stream, their branches hanging down like soft and green curtains over the water. The stream is dark and still reflecting the pale sky in its surface, and you watch as the train passes over a small stone bridge, the movement and the sound changing for a brief and subtle moment before returning to the steady and monotonous hum of the open track. You notice the way the shadows in the carriage have lost their sharp edges and have become soft and diffused as the light enters from all sides through the mist, and the grey sky and the interior of the room looks larger and more open than it did during the deep hours of the darkness. The mahogany panels have a soft and velvety glow that highlights the craftsmanship of the joinery, and the way the wood has been fitted together to create a space that is both functional and aesthetically pleasing in its simplicity and its order. Across the carriage, a passenger shifts their position, and their leather boots make a soft and muffled sound against the carpet, a small and human noise that only serves to emphasize the profound silence that otherwise fills the space. The light catches the individual leaves of the trees as they pass by the window in a slow and predictable sequence, each branch heavy with the dampness of the early morning air and the weight of the night that is finally receding to make room for the steady and pale clarity of the day. The transition from the grey of the pre-dawn hours to the first real light of the morning is a process that happens without any sudden shifts or disruptions, much like the movement of the train itself, which continues to roll along the iron rails with an unwavering and monotonous persistence that provides a sense of absolute reliability. You notice the way the light begins to define the edges of the objects inside the carriage with a new sharpness, revealing the fine layers of dust that have settled on the mahogany ledge, and the way the grain of the wood flows in long and graceful curves that seem to mimic the contours of the hills passing by outside. The air in the compartment remains still and tempered, a quiet volume of space that feels separate from the cool and misty world beyond the glass. And you find yourself observing the way the first direct rays of the sun, though still low and weak, begin to illuminate the small particles of lint and dust that dance in the air in a slow and aimless fashion. These tiny movements are hypnotic, and you follow them with a detached and peaceful interest, noting how they rise and fall in the subtle currents of air created by the movement of the machine and the warmth of the passengers, who remain tucked into their seats in a state of deep and undisturbed rest. The history of the world outside is a distant and quiet thing, a collection of stories that have reached a point of resolution and are now being replaced by the simple and ordinary routines of a country that is finding its way back to stability, one field and one farmhouse at a time. You look at the telegraph wires as they dip, rise in their never-ending wave against the pale blue sky, and you think about the permanence of the poles and the steady connection they provide between the distant towns and the quiet villages, a network of communication that functions with the same rhythmic and dependable order as the railway. The train passes a small stone bridge over a narrow road, and you catch a brief glimpse of a bicycle leaned against a fence, a simple and ordinary object that suggests the beginning of a day of quiet work and local travel. And you find a sense of comfort in the knowledge that such small and normal things are once again the primary focus of life. The movement of the carriage is a fluid and continuous shifting of weight that makes the brass fixtures in the ceiling glow with a soft and maturing light. And you watch the way the shadows of the window frames have become shorter and more distinct as the sun climbs higher above the horizon. Across the aisle, the passenger who has been asleep for many hours remains in the same position, their head tilted against the high back of the seat and their hands resting loosely in their lap. A picture of complete surrender to the rhythm of the journey and the peace of the morning. You notice the way the light highlights the texture of their heavy wool coat, revealing the patterns of the weave and the small imperfections in the fabric that speak of a long and practical life. The interior of the compartment feels like a sanctuary that has been perfectly preserved through the night, a space where the passage of time is measured only by the changing quality of the light and the steady accumulation of miles. You find yourself focusing on the small lace antimacassar on the headrest of the seat opposite you, its intricate patterns of white thread looking crisp and clean in the morning light. And you think about the hands that crafted such delicate things and the pride they must have taken in creating objects of beauty for the simple purpose of protecting the upholstery of a train car. This attention to detail and this commitment to the small things is a hallmark of the post-war recovery, a way of asserting order and care in a world that is healing and moving forward. The train sways gently as it moves through a wide and open plain where the grass is turning from a dark and misty grey to a vibrant and living green. And you watch the way the dew-covered fields reflect the sun in a single and blinding flash of light that disappears as the train enters. A shallow valley where the trees are taller and the shadows are deeper. The movement is constant and requires no effort from you. A realization that allows your mind to remain in a state of quiet and unmeasured reflection where thoughts are not forced but simply allowed to drift like the clouds in the sky. You notice a small and circular stain on the mahogany paneling near the window, a mark of something spilled many years ago that has been smoothed over by the passage of time and the regular cleaning of the carriage. And you find that you are tracing the shape of the stain with your eyes as if it were a map of a distant and forgotten land. The history of the railway is a history of these small and human marks, a record of the millions of people who have inhabited this space and who have found their own moments of peace and quiet in the middle of their long journeys. The vibration of the floor is a constant and grounding pulse that keeps you connected to the mechanical reality of the machine, a heartbeat that tells you that the engine is working with a steady and reliable power that will continue for as long as the tracks remain straight and the rails remain true. You think about the ballast under the tracks, the millions of small and jagged stones that provide the foundation for the sleepers and the iron, and you feel a sense of appreciation for the engineering and the labor that have created this stable and enduring path across the countryside. The fog in the valleys is starting to dissipate, rising in thin and ghostly wisps that vanish into the clear air, and you can now see the distant hills with a new clarity, their slopes covered in a patchwork of fields and woods that look like they have been there forever. The landscape is a study in continuity and the slow return of normalcy, a place where the seasons dictate the work and where the movement of the sun is the most important clock. The train passes a small rural station where the platform has been freshly swept, and where a single wooden bench stands waiting for the first passengers of the morning. And you notice the way the paint on the station building is a pale and honest shade of cream and green that looks bright and welcoming in the new light. The train does not stop, but carries its current cargo of sleeping people past the station with a slow and dignified movement that suggests the importance of the journey and the reliability of the service. You look at the heavy brass handle of the compartment door and notice the way it has been polished until it reflects the interior of the room, like a distorted mirror, and you find yourself observing the small and inverted version of the carriage that lives within the curve of the metal. The air in the compartment is becoming slightly warmer as the sun begins to touch the glass of the windows, and you feel the weight of your coat becoming more apparent, a heavy and comforting presence that anchors you to the seat and provides a sense of security that is both physical and emotional. The journey feels as though it could continue for many more hours, and you find that you have no desire to reach a destination or to leave the quiet sanctuary of the carriage, as the state of being in motion is enough to satisfy your mind and your spirit. You notice a small piece of thread caught in the carpet near your feet, and you watch the way it moves ever so slightly with the vibration of the train, a tiny and insignificant detail that nonetheless commands your attention in the absence of any other distractions. The history of the post-war world is being written in these quiet and ordinary moments, in the steady movement of the trains and the slow recovery of the fields, and the peaceful sleep of the people who are traveling across the land. You find yourself thinking about the quiet and disciplined work of the crew in the engine, the way they monitor the gauges and the fire with a professional and detached focus that ensures the safety and the comfort of everyone on board. Their routine is a part of the larger routine of the country, a steady and predictable rhythm that provides a sense of order and a sense of meaning to the passage of time. The train sways to the left as it follows a long and sweeping curve around a hill, and you feel the weight of your body shift against the soft cushions of the seat, a movement that is as natural and as comfortable as the shifting of the tides. The landscape outside is becoming more defined and more familiar as the morning settles in, and you find that you are recognizing the types of trees and the shapes of the hills as part of a landscape that has always existed and will always remain. The fences along the tracks are made of dark wood and wire, and they stretch out in a long and unbroken line that marks the boundary of the railway and the beginning of the open fields. And you watch the way the posts pass by the window in a regular and rhythmic sequence that is hypnotic and soothing. The interior of the carriage remains a place of stillness and peace, where the only change is the gradual movement of the shadows across the floor and the slow increase in the brightness of the light. You look at the way the light reflects off the polished surface of the small table, and notice the way the grain of the wood seems to shimmer with a pale and golden energy, a natural beauty that is highlighted by the simplicity of the environment. And as the light from the sun continues to broaden and fill the space of the carriage with a soft and unwavering clarity, you find that the world inside the compartment has reached a state of final and absolute tranquility, where every detail of the wood and the fabric and the metal is revealed in its most honest and most peaceful form. The grain of the mahogany paneling on the opposite wall seems to glow with a deep and inner warmth as the morning light travels across the surface, highlighting the intricate swirls and the long and steady lines of the timber that were shaped by the hands of craftsmen who understood the importance of creating a space that could endure the passage of time and the movement of the miles. You notice the way the light catches the small brass screws that hold the window frame in place, their heads polished to a dull shine that suggests a history of careful maintenance and a quiet pride in the quality of the machinery that carries you through the night. The air in the compartment is cool and still, a stationary volume of space that has been tempered by the warmth of the heater and the breath of the travelers, until it has become a comfortable and invisible blanket that wraps around you and encourages you to remain perfectly still in your seat. You find yourself observing the way the dust motes are now suspended in the shafts of light that cross the room, their movements so slow and so aimless that they seem to be part of the stillness itself, drifting in a three-dimensional dance that has no beginning and no end. These small particles of existence are a reminder of the quiet and ordinary nature of the world, a world where the simple things are the most important, and where the steady progression of the hours is the only schedule that matters. The weight of your body in the seat has become a part of the seat itself, a deep and solid connection that allows you to feel the minute tremors of the wheels and the soft swaying of the carriage as a natural and rhythmic extension of your own heartbeat and your own breath. Across the aisle, the other passengers remain in their states of profound and undisturbed repose, their bodies merged with the shadows and the upholstery in a way that suggests they have found a home in this moving room, and have no desire to leave the sanctuary of the journey. You look at the leather strap that is used to raise and lower the window, noting the way the material has been worn smooth and dark where many hands have gripped it over the years, and you trace the lines of the stitching with your eyes, appreciating the durability and the honesty of the craftsmanship. The history of the post-war world is a history of these durable and honest things, of the reconstruction of the ordinary and the return to the steady and predictable routines of travel and work and rest. Outside the window, the countryside has emerged from the fog and the grey of the early morning and is now a landscape of soft greens and deep browns, the fields stretching out toward the horizon in a patchwork of order and growth that speaks of the slow and steady recovery of the land. You watch as a row of newly painted fence posts passes by the window in a regular and rhythmic sequence, their white surfaces looking bright and clean against the earth, a subtle sign of the care and the attention that are being given to the structures of the rural world. The train passes a small wood where the trees are still and the leaves are heavy with the morning dew, and you can see the way the light filters through the branches to create a pattern of dappled shadows on the grass. A quiet and beautiful scene that moves past the window with a grace that is both powerful and understated. The movement of the train is a fluid and continuous thing, a shifting of weight and a pulse of energy that requires nothing from you but your presence and your willingness to be carried through the day. You find that your mind has settled into a state of quiet and unmeasured reflection where thoughts are not forced but are instead allowed to drift like the clouds in the sky, passing through your awareness and then vanishing into the stillness of the room. You notice a small and brass fixture on the wall near the luggage rack that was once used to hold a small mirror, its surface now dark and tarnished with the passage of the years. And you think about the many different faces that have been reflected in that glass as the passengers prepared for their arrivals and their departures. The history of the carriage is a history of these quiet reflections and these shared moments of anticipation and rest, a record of the human experience of the railway that is as solid and as enduring as the iron of the tracks. The vibration of the floor is a constant and soothing hum that travels up through your feet and into your spine, a mechanical song that tells you that the engine is working with a steady and reliable power that will continue for as long as the journey requires. You think about the ballast under the tracks, the millions of small stones that provide the foundation for the sleepers and the rails, and you feel a sense of gratitude for the engineering and the labor that have created this stable and unwavering path across the heart of the country. The sun is now high enough to cast long and distinct shadows across the floor of the compartment, and you watch as the shadow of the window frame moves slowly toward the door, marking the progress of the morning in a way that is both inevitable and peaceful. The interior of the carriage looks bright and welcoming in this new light, a space that has been prepared for the quiet work of the day and for the comfort of the travelers who remain tucked into their seats. You notice the way the light reflects off the polished mahogany of the small table, creating a soft and glowing rectangle that seems to hold the very essence of the stillness and the order of the room. The table is empty and clean, its surface a blank slate that invites you to rest your hands and your mind and to simply enjoy the sensation of the movement and the warmth. The history of the world outside is a distant and quiet thing, a collection of stories that have reached a point of rest and are now being replaced by the simple and ordinary realities of the present moment. You look at the way the light highlights the texture of the carpet on the floor, revealing the depths of the pile and the subtle patterns of the weave that have been worn down in the center of the aisle but remain soft and thick near the edges where the shadows are deepest. The carpet is a dark and muted color that provides a sense of warmth and comfort to the room, a tactile reminder of the care that has been taken to create an environment that is conducive to rest and recovery. The train sways gently to the left as it follows a long and sweeping curve around a hill, and you feel the weight of your body shift against the soft cushions of the seat, a movement that is as natural and as comfortable as the shifting of the tides or the turning of the earth. You find that you are breathing more deeply and more slowly than you have in a very long time. Each breath a long and peaceful movement that fills your lungs with the calm air of the carriage and then releases it back into the silence. The texture of the fabric against your back is a constant and reassuring pressure that reminds you that you are here, and that you are safe in this moving sanctuary that carries you through the quiet landscape. You notice a small and almost invisible scratch on the surface of the glass, a tiny line that catches the light and creates a small spectrum of color that dances across the wood, paneling as the train moves through the shadows and the light. This small imperfection is a part of the history of the window and the history of the journey, a sign of the many different miles that have been traveled and the many different things that have been seen through this pane of glass. The journey feels as though it has become a permanent state of being, a continuous and fluid progression through the world that has no need for a beginning or an end, as the motion itself is the destination and the peace is the goal. You think about the quiet and disciplined work of the crew in the engine far ahead, their hands steady on the controls and their eyes fixed on the track, as they guide the train toward the horizon with a singular and unwavering focus. Their routine is a part of the larger routine of the country, a steady and predictable rhythm that provides a sense of order and a sense of meaning to the passage of time. The train passes a wide and fertile valley where the fields are beginning to show the first signs of the season. The earth turned over and ready for the seeds that will grow into the harvest of the future. You catch a glimpse of a small stone wall that marks the edge of a pasture, its stones fitted together without mortar in a way that has endured for generations. And you feel a sense of peace in the knowledge that these ancient and simple structures remain constant even as the world around them moves through periods of change and recovery. The movement of the train is a fluid and unwavering progression that requires nothing from you but your presence and your willingness to be carried. A realization that allows your mind to remain in a state of quiet and unmeasured reflection where the thoughts are allowed to simply exist without any need for action or any need for change. You notice the way the light from the sun is now strong enough to reach the back of the compartment, illuminating the corners of the ceiling and revealing the small details of the joinery and the paint that have been hidden in the shadows for so long. Good night.